Hello everyone. We are in MOOC SWAM course on nationalism and constitutional growth in India 1858 to 1920. Friends, in the last lecture we were discussing about Gandhi's understanding of nationalism, Gandhi's idea of nationalism, how Gandhi emphasized that unity in diversity is a very important component to define India as a nation. Of course, Gandhi is going back to the ancient civilization, but Gandhi is acknowledging the fact that there were multiple languages, multiple religions, and in contemporary times, if we want to live in harmony, then we have to have a freedom in terms of spiritual transformation, moral transformation, and people need to have a self-realization in terms of Swaraj, not as a external condition, but Swaraj also as a mental condition by kind of stressing on the fact on means and ends, which is very important near Gandhi. So Gandhi is kind of explaining the idea of nationalism and religious pluralism in identifying the common language in Hindustani language, where which borrows from Urdu and Hindi, and it becomes a lingua franca of the nation. So let us, friend, ponder over on Tagore's idea of nationalism. Rabindranath Tagore, who is also popularly called Gurudev, uh, in fact, is a very prolific writer. I mean, Tagore, a Nobel recipient in literature for his magnum opus called Gitanjali, and later Tagore traveled all over the world by giving the message of peace and tolerance and internationalism. Tagore stands for cosmopolitan values, and Tagore stands for argumentation, and Tagore is an essayist. And Tagore, also participated in the freedom struggle, and also someone who is kind of talented in many fields and many areas. So let us focus on Tagore's idea of nationalism. Ravindranath Tagore wrote an essay in 1917 when Gandhi arrived in the active politics in Champaran, particularly. This essay is called Nationalism in India, delivered in United States of America. So, the audience of this essay is basically US people, right? And and Tagore is delivering this speech. So in a sense, many a times in this essay, you know, Tagore is bringing America's experience, uh, in regard to nationalism, but also Tagore is in a way bringing the West, the Western, construct of nationalism. So we'll see the content that what Tagore basically tries to understand, and writes about nationalism in India. Now, nationalism in India after 1917 took a different trajectory altogether. So maybe Tagore has had to write after, say, 20 years of his speech, and I'm sure that Tagore would have definitely realized that some of the lacuna and gap in understanding on, for an example, on caste question particularly. So race and caste, that what Tagore is, kind of contrasting and trying to uh, study comparatively, is something that Tagore would have changed if he would have revised his essay. That's again my understanding, but let's focus right on Tagore's essay. So, what Tagore is saying, that there's some kind of shift, focus from political to social issues in India by 1917. And Tagore is emphasizing the universal nature of the social problem, and particularly nationalism as one of the social problem. And Tagore is comparing India with Europe's political dominance by highlighting India's unique challenge, and that is the race problem. Now, the race problem, that what Tagore is understanding, one need to read the, almost 17, 18 pages essay to understand, that. But I'll definitely bring into some of the issues. So Tagore acknowledges the persistent issue of caste distinction. For Tagore, politics in the West have dominated Western ideals, and Tagore says we in India are trying to imitate them. Right? We have to remember, it's Tagore's words. We have to remember that in Europe, where peoples had their racial unity from the beginning, and where natural resources were insufficient for the inhabitants. So, the civilization has naturally taken the character of political and commercial aggressiveness. So, what Tagore is saying, that because of the lack of resources, there is commercial aggressiveness from the West. For on the one hand, they had no internal complications, and on the other, they had to deal with neighbors who were strong and rapacious. So, to have perfect combination among themselves and a watchful attitude of animosity against others was taken as a solution of their problem. You just try to see the very root of nationalism, from where all this starts, right? So the very animosity is considered as solution of their problem. Hating, how come hating others can be solution to anyone's problem? But that happened. But that happened in the in the West, and hence the very rigid form of nation and nationalism, right? So in former days, they organized and plundered. In the present age, the same spirit continues, and they organize and exploit the whole world. But from the earliest beginnings of history, India has had her own problem constantly before her. It is the race problem. Each nation must be conscious of its mission, and we in India must realize that we cut a poor figure when we are trying to be political, simply because we have not yet been finally able to accomplish what was set before us by our providence, right? So, what Tagore understands is race unity in India. So, Tagore discusses India's attempt to reconcile race differences, and and here race differences particularly is not a race in terms of color differences, a race in terms of a caste differences, like hierarchy, that what basically Tagore is understanding. So interestingly, Tagore is mentioning Nanak, Kabir, Chaitanya, who promoted unity. Then Nanak, Kabir, and Chaitanya all in a way were to some extent figures who actually borrowed from all the religions and created a kind of heterodoxy where it did not actually focuses on eulogizing one god. Rather, for them, it's God is everywhere, and people are fighting endlessly in the name of God, but God is not really happy with them, right? So people need to be united. So he Tagore is kind of proposing a spiritual basis for unity rather than political imitation. So because we in India are imitating the West, also Tagore is talking about the exploration of the global challenge of diverse races coming together, presents the choice between perpetual competition and cooperation, is stressing the need for moral power, love, and spiritual unity. Now, what Tagore is writing? Tagore is saying that each individual has his self love. Therefore, his brute instinct leads him to fight with others in the sole pursuit of his self interest. But man has also his higher instincts of sympathy and mutual help. That's mutual help and sympathy is not a lower instinct; it's a higher instinct. The people who are lacking in this higher moral power and who therefore cannot combine in fellowship with one another must perish or live in a state of degradation. Only those peoples have survived and achieved civilization who have this spirit of cooperation strong in them. So we find that from the beginning of history, men had to choose between fighting with one another and combining between serving their own interests or the common interest to fall. Right? So these are really prophetic words by by Tagore. Now, what because Tagore is writing or speaking to the American audience, uh, Tagore is rather asking them to by acknowledging, recognizing America's untroubled position and experimentalism. And Tagore calls on America to lead in achieving a spiritual unity. And Tagore draws a parallel between America and India in uniting diverse races and urges America to embrace its responsibility for a great future. And hence, here comes the critique of nationalism. Tagore challenges the concept of nationalism in India, argues against the idolatry of the nation over humanity. Remember, idolatry, making the very idea of nation and nationalism is idol, is something which need to be worshipped. I have been talking about that, and Tagore is saying that this very idolatry of the nation over humanity is wrong, and he emphasizes the need to fight against education that prioritizes country over universal ideals. Tagore is reflecting on the attempt to adopt Western methods in Japan, and also reflecting and warns against exhausting cultural inheritance for borrowed weapons, and also stresses the importance of developing from within to ensure sustainability. Now, let us see that what Tagore is talking about, nationalism. Tagore says India has never had a real sense of nationalism. Mind it, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Gandhi, all are acknowledging, those two figures acknowledge that, you know, we have an ancient civilization, we have a civilizational identity, and hence Gandhi is acknowledging that that's the nation. But and hence unity. Tagore is saying India has never had a real sense of nationalism. Even though from childhood, Tagore is saying that I had been taught that the idolatry of nation is almost better than reverence for God and humanity. So during the childhood days only, Tagore was. I believe I have outgrown that teaching, and it is my conviction, Tagore's conviction, that my countrymen will gain truly their India by fighting against that education which teaches them that a country is greater than the ideals of humanity, right? So, in a way, the educated India at present is trying to absorb some lessons from history contrary to the lessons from our ancestors. The East is, in fact, attempting to take unto itself a history which is not the outcome of its own living. Japan, for example, thinks she is getting powerful through adopting Western methods, but after she has exhausted her inheritance, only the borrowed weapons of civilization will remain to her. She will not have developed herself from within. So, one need to, you know, one need to acknowledge the fact that humanity is above all, right? And this borrowing uh, without thinking about the you know present context and the very content of us society, that borrowing itself, the very that kind of ideology and ideas will ultimately even deplete our own moral resources and ideational resources. So Tagore is what is importance of ideals. Tagore is differentiating between lessons that train the mind and those that affect deeper nature. Urges caution before accepting lessons that may compromise cultural inheritance. And Tagore is highlighting the unique materials and moral purposes of India's ideals. And in that, West and East can collaborate so that India can arrive, and India can actually realize its mission. So Tagore again is writing, nationalism is a great menace. It is a particular thing which for years has been at the bottom of India's troubles, and in as much as we have been ruled and dominated by a nation that is strictly political in its attitude, we have tried to develop within ourselves, despite our inheritance from the past, a belief in our eventual political destiny. So, nationalism is a great menace that is something that total rejection of nationalism by Tagore, right? And then further, critique of nationalism by condemning the general idea of nationalism. Tagore is discussing how organized power drains higher moral nature, right? Tagore is warning against the dangers of perpetuating slavery in the pursuit of freedom, and also that how this constructive program can actually bring the moral victory, and how creating opportunities is important than mere borrowing and begging, right? So Tagore is saying that is a one of the weaknesses of our society is the caste system, and Tagore calls for addressing the caste system and outdated traditions for true progress in India. And Tagore is acknowledging that in this India faces difficulties due to vast diversity and races. Unlike Europe, India is one country with multiple races. Again, just remember that what race means here. It struggles within the with the challenges of diversity and unity. So there's diversity in India's caste system. It acknowledges, but here Tagore slips little bit in terms of that how caste system has been managing the diversity, and emphasizes India's historical spirit of toleration. and highlights the loose yet close social federation known as Hinduism. And Tagore keeps going on by pitting Indian approaches against the Western approaches, where the India's approach of toleration and managing diversity has been part and parcel of the civilization, and the Western, policies of colonization and economic policies has been reducing people into the slavery, and that this is not really higher moral power that what Western society should be kind of delivering to the other societies. So it's a spirit of conflict and competition, where Western societies need to reconcile this problem, and ultimately is the wealth mongering which is leading to the disaster. And remember that I said that capitalism ultimately, in a way, is creating that monster called nationalism, and I gave you example of the Renaissance. Also, the economic system and greed is very much interconnected. So, Tagore is critical of the West for the relentless pursuit of wealth, and he questions if the lust for wealth and power has any bounds. And then Tagore talks about that. One need to focus on moral health, moral power, and instead of this loot and plunder, and social ideals and moral purposes need to be inculcated in terms of spiritual liberation, and that is ultimately that what is called one need to focus on the true freedom, rather only political freedom. So Tagore criticizes the pursuit of power and money as leading to a form of slavery, and asserts that true freedom comes from acknowledging moral and spiritual freedom as objectives. And then ultimately, Tagore comes on India by analyzing that there's a nationalist delusions in India, and there's a lot of social inadequacies which has not been addressed by the leaders, and one need to build political freedom on the quicksand of social slavery, and of what nationalist leaders are in fact doing, and without abolition of the social slavery like untouchability and other things. And then Tagore goes on to say that these are the hindrances to the unity of India, and Tagore gives the example of Switzerland, that how there is racial differences, where in India you have a caste division, and then there's a tyranny in social and political life in India, where it needs persistent reforms, and the political focus need to be on how one can actually organize people socially, and political energy should actually uh, lead into those reformation. And then ultimately that how British has suppressed Indian industries, and that has actually led to a disaster, where Tagore is again critical of the commercial civilization, and he disapproves the ugly commercial organization, and instead beauty and truth requires laser self-control and dignity. Those things are also very important for creative endeavor. And Tagore says that there's a temptation of wealth, equates the kind of pursuit of wealth to a temptation for immortality. Tagore criticizes the West for succumbing to the lure of wealth, and warns against commercialism's barbarity and power-driven ideals. And ultimately, Tagore calls for simplicity and cooperation, and also believing in harmony and completeness to to have a advocacy for compensation of eternal justice. One need to transform all sort of slavery, misery, insults into golden triumph. How one is going to do that, that remains a big task for the nationalist leaders of his time. And Tagore reflected on all the important points to to critique nationalism as a force which is divisive, stands for plunder and loot, stands for temptation of wealth and ultimate social decay. So thank you so much. There's a lot of things to discuss about Tagore, but I'll restrict myself here, and we'll try to understand some of the other issues in nationalism discourse in the coming lectures, to highlight more nuanced points so that you have a rich understanding on nationalism. Thank you very much.